Good evening. This is the December 10th meeting of the Master Plan Implementation Committee. I'll call the meeting to order at 7 p.m. I'm going to sneak this in before public comment. We do have a new member with us. As of a week ago.
Yes.
So welcome.
Yes.
Thank you.
Welcome, George. I don't know if you know everybody, maybe we
Yeah,
should
I
think so.
introduce
well.
ourselves.
Hi, George. I'm Jim C. George Bluff. Nice to meet you. I met everybody else.
Everyone else? Good.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's good. I'd say catch up on the minutes, but I've not done a good job posting them, so I'll email them to you.
Well, I think they're all posted, because you posted before, and
Oh, you
I
did?
posted last week.
Yeah,
So I think if you go on, they're all
Perusing.
posted.
Oh, perfect.
and I forwarded
Yeah,
the
I saw the ones.
last
link.
ones to
Yeah.
him. Yes.
I got access, but I couldn't post the agenda or anything, so I have to talk to Lucy and figure out why. 'cause-
Talk to
I
the
did.
expert.
Well, I did, she posted the agenda for me, so.
Well,
Talk to Lucy, but what I discovered was they had given me a separate ID or email to go on with, and I was using my old one, my ordinary one, and it was wrong. So when they gave me the one specifically for posting, it made a difference. But I suspect you already knew
yeah,
that.
you can't use one you had before.
That's the
Or
only
if
email
you're on-
address I
if
have.
you're- Oh, no, not your email address, but your password.
Code,
Oh.
yeah.
Because I think they give you access. I was just running that, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
I'll have to take a look.
Yeah, they'll have to just give you, you can use the same password, but then they'll give you access to
Okay.
this committee.
All right. So welcome.
Thank you.
Public comment?
None.
None, okay. Thanks for coming. Review approved minutes from 11/19.
I did make, that I already noted, one error. I've got Francine, Mike Rosenberg
I saw
opening
that.
the meeting, so we took Francine off. That was just a poor
That was the only thing I
read-in.
noted.
Did you see anything else that said?
My last name is spelled wrong,
Oh, well, let's get that
but
right.
that's deniability of being here. It's B-U-R-G.
B-U-R-G. Okay.
Yeah,
Like in Pittsburgh.
like in Pittsburgh. I think that was it. So I didn't see anything. They're well written.
That's fine. Do a great job summarizing.
Good.
After we have our lengthy discussions here and kind of waver off track.
Yeah, definitely. If there's no other comments, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I move to approve the minutes of November 19th.
I'll second.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Approved.
And I need to abstain because I wasn't here.
Yeah, so I'm staying.
All right, next item, Chapter 3. So what we've been doing, George, is sort of traveling through the chapter as a group, talking about things, and then landing on the goals and priorities and sort of reviewing them. Kind of discussing where there could be hiccups, where we're doing well. So yeah, we kind of leave it open as we go through. If anyone has comments, questions, things they saw in the chapters that sort of caught them off guard, or if there's adjustments that the statement may have been true eight years ago, but it may not be true today. Those types of things we just try to capture.
Well, one thing that jumped out at me that I thought was interesting, I don't know if I'm going to be able to put my finger on it, the fact that Southampton elected, I think in the middle of the 19th century, to not participate with the manufacturing boom of the greater area because we didn't want immigrants. Did you read that?
Yeah.
So that just, tells me why we didn't become an industrial community, for one thing, and it sort of tells me about the people that lived here at the time a little bit. It just jumped out at me.
Well, it was that, and it was that they wanted to preserve kind of the rural feel,
character.
Yeah.
which really hasn't changed,
It hasn't
and that's why we don't have a bike path. I mean,
Yeah.
really, I said, this
I'll go back to
happened
the
like
bike path.
150 years before. And the thought process in terms of
Yeah.
what people feel is important, what they want to preserve, has remained the same. I thought that was pretty
It was
interesting.
very interesting.
It's good.
Because I think when the bike path first got mentioned, like 20 years ago, I mean, there was, a lot of negativity
Yes.
around that. I mean, people were afraid of, people encroaching on the community and what that would bring to us and so forth. And it was-
I think in some situations, I think some of that is sort of true. So I know where I'm from, they did a bike path that was on the railroad, and it was not behind residential houses. And then they looked to extend that bike path further, and they wanted to take by eminent domain back portions of people's backyards to continue the path. And I think that, some areas, like for us, I think it'd be really, it's kind of a great project, right? The railroad's there, the land needed is there, but in some of the towns, they did end up taking property. Some of the residential neighborhoods weren't too happy. But
I guess I
Some.
had just a question, which Christina maybe can already answer. I was surprised that we didn't actually have any locally designated historical districts per se.
Yes, and that is true, and they're very hard to pass. They're very restrictive. When you add in a local district, it sets guidelines for exterior repairs. So it designates different replacement things, and it's always been felt that it would never pass in Southampton.
Gotcha, okay, that would make
East
sense.
Street would, or, the center district would be a logical area for one,
Yeah.
and we've never, in the years that I've been on, I tried
Yeah.
to push it, propose it to the
Sure,
town.
yeah.
It's not to say it's not worth a try, but they are quite restrictive.
And does the town determine how restrictive it is or is not? Or are there guidelines for it? Because these are local past districts, right? But do they have state?
I'm not sure about that.
Just, yeah,
Because I
mentioned-
hear you, they can be very, you gotta use period color paints, and if you have shutters on the
Yeah.
house, they have to be wood, you can't use aluminum. It's very,
Correct, yeah.
the
you
purpose is good, but
Yeah.
if you live in a house, it can really restrict what you can and can't do. You want to put an addition on, well, it's got to look this way, or you can't, or
Yeah, it just says here that many commissions have developed design guidelines. So it sounds like it's up to the local town or whoever to
set the guidelines.
set the guidelines, and then you've got to have a 2/3 vote at the town meeting.
But I think in general, it has been considered that they are restrictive enough that it probably wouldn't sail here in Southampton.
So it's never gone before town meeting? It
No, I
just-
don't, well, I don't believe it has, not in my time on the commission.
Okay. It's just the assumption it wouldn't pass.
Yes, that is exactly the assumption, very much an assumption, it's never been tried, to my knowledge.
it may also be, you could argue, what's the need? Because as a town that really seems to be happy with the way things are, what are you trying to preserve with a historic district? I don't see anyone putting in a 3-4-story brick condominium on East Street. It doesn't seem likely. So maybe there's just no motivation to do it because people don't really, what's the need?
Well, the need hasn't arisen yet.
Right.
But that might. I mean, we still have zoning laws, and we still have, guidelines for the planning board to follow for building. But what if one of our beautiful historic buildings, they decided to do something really outrageous, and some people found it really offensive, and it wouldn't happen if, we'd have a leg to stand on if we had
That is
that
right,
kind of
that is
guideline.
correct.
Right, and I suspect what happens in most towns is it doesn't happen until something like that happens.
Yes.
And then
Yeah.
people are motivated. to do
Was there ever anything when the old Grange Hall, which used to be the Methodist Church, was that any problem when that was torn down, or was that?
Yeah, there was a controversy. There was the group of people who wanted it retained.
Yeah.
But the Grange, I believe, Barbara, you can probably,
I know the Grange kind of dissolved, but.
correct,
Yeah.
there wasn't, the Grange couldn't maintain it.
Right.
I believe, and so ended up having to sell it.
It was offered to the town of Southampton for $1,
Uh-huh.
and it was not. The group that wanted to take it down was more powerful than the group that wanted to preserve it.
Who paid for the removal of it? The town or the then owners?
I don't believe the town did.
I think it
Because
was
we didn't
the-
own it.
I think it was the company that salvaged it because there were purportedly Tiffany windows.
Oh,
in
they're
it.
beautiful windows in there.
Actually, the windows are Lafarge.
Across from,
Right across from the church, pretty much.
Is
there's
this the
a small
photograph of
empty
it
lot
here?
that we
It
just
says the
bought, the
Episcopal
town
Church
just
on
bought,
page
you know.
48. Is that
It was the
that
Methodist
became
church.
the Grange?
Yeah.
Methodist church.
That is not,
Methodist Episcopal Church.
yes,
Yeah.
but that one burned,
Yeah.
and what is the Grange was replaced. That's a slightly confusing photograph.
Yeah.
That's the original church.
Okay.
I see.
When the replacement became the Grange, and there is a photograph of that downstairs in the hallway.
Same location.
Yes, same
It's just a
location.
vacant lot now, right?
Yes, it's a vacant lot that the town just bought again for $10,000, or bought for $10,000.
Well, now there's a profitable transaction.
Now, isn't the
From $1 to
assumption,
$10,000.
where did I
Should've struck
hear
while iron
this?
was hot.
Open Space Committee meeting, we were
Timing is
somehow
everything in real
talking about
estate.
how that might be the new leach field for possibly, if they were to renovate the police.
That was when it was purchased, that was the sales point, but it did fail Title V, a perk test in the past, and so with the new Title V regulations, I don't know whether it has a perk site there or not, quite frankly.
The town owns the space now.
Yeah, I just bought it within the last
So
year.
they did, I want to say someone was in there digging around. I don't know if they were official perk tests, but I want to say that was being looked at. Whether or not it was official, I don't know.
I don't know either.
I thought they had done perk tests, but it wasn't coming up with anything. Thought it wasn't.
Well, it didn't, historically it hasn't, but Title V changes, and I don't know the status of it, but we do know Southampton owns it.
We own it.
There's one error in here that I'll just point out, and that is the map of what they're calling the Lockville Historic District. That's the Center Historic District. And in the paragraph above, it says that the Lockville Historic District is 240 acres. It is not.
Okay.
It's more like 19. And so, and that's an estimate. I'm going to,
What page are you on?
oh, I'm sorry,
45.
page 45 in mine.
I have a different copy of the
Yeah, this is the original.
original.
So
Yeah, and
page 45, it has the 240 acres, so we changed that to 18.
Well,
Within the map is-
this is much smaller. I don't have the exact figure on that, but the 240 and is either the entire acreage for historic districts in Southampton, or it's this center district, which is outlined on my map as figure 3-1. And my copy is indeed different from...
31B is, I think, the one that I've got in
Yeah,
my copy.
31A and 31B.
Okay, so see, I don't even have that. This is,
You didn't have, you only have the center
Yeah.
historic district, but even then. it's a
okay, so
different
that's
map.
been corrected, yeah.
But it still says 240
Still says
acres.
240 Lockville,
Yeah, well, it's not.
so it could be the entire thing if it was that.
Well, Bob Kozub suggests that it's the entirety of our historic districts, but that is something that I'm going to, just for my own interest, as well as to be able to convey it, I'm going to get that straightened out. But I have been slightly tripped up this week, so didn't get it done.
It's okay. I'm happy you came. I know you weren't sure. All right. Let's see.
I guess while we're on sort of the same page area, the other thing that came to my mind was just looking at the whole West Park Cemetery, and there's next to nothing that's really there anymore that's protected, right? Is there,
The cemetery.
just the cemetery
alone.
itself?
So perhaps you all know that that land is all owned by the city of Holyoke now for water protection. And there remains the one house, the 18th century house that is, I'm forgetting the name of the original owner, the builder for the moment, but last October, the current owners sought to get a demolition permit. And so the Historical Commission placed a demolition delay on it for 1 year, and we tried our best to find a solution to that, and did not. So they have now the authority to tear it down, and that will be demolished. But that is the last home in the West Part area, and there were, I think, about 43 homes there at the time. That it was before Holyoke
Before the dam.
either purchased or took the land.
So that was interesting, purchased versus took, because this says that Holyoke appealed or petitioned the General Court of Boston to request this area of land for the purpose of building a reservoir.
Correct.
So did Southampton have a vote, or just it got taken because the General Court said, yes, you can do it?
One of my impression is that those who would sell to Holyoke, the houses were bought and the others were taken. So I believe that's what Mr. Hendrick told me. But indeed, they were taken. The whole area was, in the end, taken. And why this one house was left, I'm not sure. And unfortunately, it was much changed, essentially gutted. All that really remains of it is the timber frame in its original.
Where is it on the road? Is it the last house up there, or is it?
Yeah, well, no, it used to be.
Yeah. It's been a while since they've been.
The Flynn's
Yeah,
last
okay.
owned it, yeah.
Oh, really? Okay, that's the house. Oh, well. Huh.
So on page 58, when it recommends a demolition delay bylaw, that's already implemented.
That is,
Demolition,
yes.
sorry.
Yeah. Now, that's interesting because that isn't in my goals and strategies. I guess I better get a new copy.
Page 58, no?
She has the original that wasn't updated.
You got, yes, you must have the,
There it is.
Oh, there it is. Okay, yeah, I didn't actually, Bob and I were reviewing this today. Yeah, that was put in place. Well, at least 2 years ago now. And it says usually 6 months, but it's in fact a 1 year, a 12-month demolition delay.
it is on the list of things that summarize what we had accomplished. So
That is
That was
true,
one.
but the other item listed, Francine, Bob said to me tonight, was not complete.
not,
No, the digitizing of historical photographs.
well, that's good. That's why I said everybody needed to go back and check all of them, the ones that we thought were done, and there may be some you find that are finished that you have no knowledge of, so, okay. we'll go
I
back.
did address that at the library, that same one about digitizing historical photographs, and it's in process. It's not done, but it's been.
Okay.
Well, what Bob said to me was that the original it was initiated through the library, and that the person who was doing it made a subjective decision as to what needed to be digitized, and that apparently was not very satisfactory, and also she left. So it's an incomplete job. And so you're saying someone else has taken it up?
No, I think we're talking about the same individual. She started the process, and I didn't know about this little subjective decision-making, but that she started it. I'm pretty sure we're talking about the same, but she's left. But she's left, so it's not done.
No, it is not.
All right.
How many images are we talking about?
Well, now Bob also, I believe, referred to the collection that's in the Historical Society. There are a lot of them. It's a huge project. I don't know the scope of it, but we, as the commission too, we have historical photographs. So that, it's an important job to be done, and I don't know exactly, that will be something that we'll talk about at the next meeting, I think, about whether that can be picked up again and who would be doing that. I imagine, again, it would be volunteers. Bob did give me his files from March 2017 about what is completed, in process, next for consideration, distant future, and questionable.
Okay.
Oh, and there's one from 16 as well, so he was somewhat diligent in keeping up his notes.
So that could be integrated into this, so that we have a forward picture. Okay.
So it was in 2015 that the demolition delay.
Can we get copies of that?
Yeah. Mhm.
Has anyone been to our Wikipedia webpage? Has that been updated?
I saw it today. I figured Megan had already been there. No?
That was the person I was asking.
I've been behind in schoolwork, so.
Guess that's all right.
This is in England. Specify, right? I don't know if there's a glare.
It just says add a summary of the history of the town.
Yes.
I saw that already, dates and references are in it.
The top of 57.
It's a pretty easy one
Yeah.
to tick off the list.
I've never updated a written page, but I can look into it.
Okay.
So,
I went to a meeting last week on the moratorium on the marijuana law here in town. And
mean the
it
public
was here, the public hearing. And what they talked about where designated areas in which something like that could be housed. And it's just surprising that, according to here, if this is correct, we have so little commercial area in the town.
Zoned commercial,
Zoned,
yeah.
right. So with all the restrictions, and other restrictions about where it might be located and distances from this and from that, in addition to the fact that there's so little land available for commercial use.
well, it also kind of, you create a spot zoning, right? Inadvertently or advertently, because you're putting restrictions on it in one case, and you know that the town already has these other areas that'll have the restrictions on it, which it makes it undesirable
Right.
to develop.
To do.
Which may or not be in everyone's best interest, but it defers or deters the development.
But I guess overall, when we talk about finding alternate sources of revenue for the town, and we keep talking, well, if we could locate more, or have more companies or small businesses that don't need sewage facilities and so forth, move in. But on top of that, just space-wise, we're limited. So I don't know how much growth potential there is unless there's, some changes in our zoning.
Just one last question on the west part. Given what's happened out there, then with this last house being possibly ready for demolition, is there anything we need to do to think about protecting the cemetery, given that that is the oldest thing around?
I think that is protected.
Okay.
I believe it is. The center cemetery is now on the National Historic
Register.
District.
All
Yeah.
right,
I'm going to have to check about the West Part Cemetery because that indeed is a very old
Yeah.
and important cemetery.
and I
But
know-
it's town-owned, so
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
protected in that way.
So the town maintains it more or
Oh,
less? I mean,
yes. The Cemetery Commission
Yeah.
maintains that.
Is Glenn still on that?
No, and then there's a third small cemetery on College up behind the Melanson House, is it?
This the good lady? Is that? No.
Yeah.
Across from the Sunoco station.
Yes.
Whereabouts?
Across from the Sunoco station?
Behind the house, it's across from the Sunoco station.
Yes, and I was just saying to Bob,
It's like a family plot.
I don't know how many graves there are there, but in talking about the goal with Bob, who is the chairman of the Historical Commission, and access to historic sites, that is one that I mentioned. That would be strategy 3-2D. And I was just saying to him that I would like access to that. I've never been to it, and I think it would be interesting.
So they currently own the land because it was a family
Apparently.
lot of some sort.
Well, I don't know. They own, whether the town owns the graveyard itself, or whether it's on private.
But you need
You'd have to access through private land.
And if it's, is it protected? If it's owned by, I mean, you're saying the town owns the actual cemetery? I mean, is there any
Maybe.
possibility that somebody will
Oh, I don't
not
think.
care for it?
Well, the Cemetery Commission maintains it.
Oh, they do, okay.
Oh, yeah.
And how can you not, I mean, I guess, no matter when they were buried, you can't just exhume the
Correct.
body,
There
right?
are
So there's
no
really
policies.
nothing you can do.
How we're defining protected, you're not going
Right.
to remove the cemetery or put a house there. That doesn't happen, I don't think.
But yeah, how are you maintaining it? How do you?
But it is under the care of the Cemetery Commission, all three cemeteries.
And which is the oldest one, the west or the center?
Well, the Center Cemetery is 1734, I believe, the original grave.
38.
And it is, I believe, if not the oldest, one of the oldest continuously used cemeteries in the country.
Really?
No, that's what it must be,
It is
continuously
cemetery.
used. Yeah, because I read that, I'm like,
Yes.
it's old, but it's not that old, but continuously used.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't know the earliest dates in West Park.
Yeah. Well, they're saying in here, 1788.
Yeah, so that,
So that'd be second, I guess.
oh, yeah.
It's on page 49 in our thing. Right after the picture of the church. And then now we've bought land to expand the current cemetery, right?
Correct.
Somewhere.
Behind, and it's owned jointly by Concom Cemetery, and who's the third that owns?
Water.
Thank you, Barbara.
That's actually in here, the triple ownership.
Behind, isn't that a slope?
Cedarhurst area?
They have
It's,
terraced stones, I like this idea.
no, it's not down
Catskill
towards
this
way.
Cedars, it's off,
To the right.
again, can you?
By the old Huntley place?
Exactly.
By the Huntley place, to the right?
Well,
It's not
Or was, well,
it was Huntley's, it was Enid Huntley's.
right, okay.
She sold it to the town.
You have to go up Walcott Road and take a left, and that's where they plan to put, expand it that way. From, I think it's Edwards Road.
Edwards is down off Glendale. It's not off Wolcott.
It's not off of Wolcott?
No.
Well, there's nothing to the left off of Wolcott.
There's that little spot.
I believe that you go past
The power lines?
Maybe.
Out toward the water
I
tower.
think there's a lot of housing in the,
Water tower
Oh,
is on
okay.
the left.
Okay. You're
And then
going,
a little
okay.
oh, she's up further, yeah.
You're going across Little Mountain.
At the beginning.
Yes. And
That little spot.
Boyle zone down one side.
Yeah.
And the younger
Right, Google
boys,
Maps.
David and Tommy, I believe.
Yeah, and my brother owns part of that up there too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Seems like a long way from,
yeah, that seems like.
It
I-
does.
I thought it was
It
closer
does.
to the
I
cemetery.
thought
didn't realize-
it does abut the cemetery.
Yes,
though.
it does, but it goes a very deep down
Yeah,
over that brook, which I think is Potash, is that Potash? And
so it comes out behind the old Pinky Parsons and goes all the way down. I'm like, oh my goodness. Who knew?
I'm just speaking history.
You guys may well be talking a different language.
The old strawberry field, the old strawberry fields, yeah.
nothing showing from Google,
Huh,
saying
yeah, I didn't realize it was up
but
there.
the cemetery road
Boy, talk about access.
So I didn't realize that we had an old mine.
I didn't either.
Is it,
Lead mine?
cemeteries.
is it,
Somehow.
blocked off? Is it open? Is it safe?
I was told that Mr. Hendricks is an expert in that location, because when I first moved to town, he was going to tour a whole bunch of us up there, and that was 22 years ago, and he can't do that any longer, I don't think, go up there. But then Kathy Trueheart tells me it's on their land, and I'm not so sure, is that true? The lead mine is on the Trueheart land?
Some of it is. It's on both sides.
Okay.
There are different,
Accesses to it?
well, it's different. It's not a mine that you enter. There's one open pit on the, as you're going up lead mine. There's a steep rise, and there's one very deep open pit. When I was a child, that just had a little fence around it. And it was filled, had a lot of water in it. And then there are other things on the other side of the road. There's a shaft that's identifiable. There are a few landmarks there. And there's a fellow who grew up in Loudville who has done a lot of research on the lead mines and gives talks about that area. There's not a lot remaining.
Okay. Can I just tell a little anecdote that I learned, I believe this is true about the Center Cemetery, when they had the Hartford circus fire, which I think was in the middle of the 1940s. There was an unidentified child, and for eons, forever, she has since been identified, I heard, in recent years. You heard this? And she was buried in Center Cemetery. Yeah,
That's
you know
true.
that story, right? My husband's aunt and his two older cousins perished in that fire. They were there, and it just happens to be a little family piece, but we knew that unidentified child was buried. For why would they take him from Hartford to Southampton? I don't know.
Well, she was a Southampton child,
But
wasn't
they didn't know she was
The
unidentified.
aunt was called to identify the child, and her sister, the mother of the child, was so devastated that the aunt said, no, that is not this little girl. And so after the mother passed away and the aunt passed away, there was a fireman that was very instrumental in bringing the child back to Southampton.
Wow. Okay. Wow.
It's quite a story. It was a sad story. It was devastating to the family.
All right. On a more upbeat topic.
He made bullets from the lead used in bullets in the
I know.
Revolution.
In the Revolutionary War, yeah.
But it was never a successful mine. There were many attempts to make it successful, and it never really thrived.
Something interesting, if you look at figures 3.1A and 3.1B, there's really only one house that separates those two historic districts.
That's what
It's just bizarre to me why they don't connect. I wonder what the story is behind that, because
3-1B, there's only one house?
But
If you look
Where are you looking?
between the two, there's one house, otherwise they could be contiguous and go all the way through.
I'm missing that.
If you look at 31A, I think that's really what you're looking at.
Right, you see the top of 3-1,
The little square at the
Yeah.
bottom of 31A is really the beginning of the next map.
right, and see how there's just one house between them. Isn't that strange?
I didn't notice that.
This one right here.
Former Road.
Go there. Must be.
So you can see that big salt box is the top of the
Yeah.
Lockville there.
And I don't know what house that is sometimes.
That would be the Gorton house if it's a big salt box.
Well, that's in the 1B, that's in the Lockville, but just above it, not.
It's in college.
If it were, it would be contiguous, or continuous, or something. And
So that's, it says be here on.
No, I think you're right, Christina.
You're on the-
You're on College Highway.
right, you can see it.
College Highway, former road, if you're coming to College Highway from Westfield.
Looking at a different map than
it's
we're
a-
talking.
If you're coming College Highway from Westfield, former road would be on your left, which
Like
it
a
is.
post-war
That, right there was
Yeah.
your Gorton house.
type
Yeah, it is.
Oh,
Yeah.
construction,
Wow.
so it's
Yeah,
not.
they are. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think you're
Doesn't
right.
fit the definition.
The one up on the hill,
No.
The one to the left of that is,
right above the Lyman
That's the one I
tin mill.
thought it was, because this one's like
Hey, that's-
mid,
right, that
Oh,
was
why wouldn't
almost
that
like
be?
mid-century modern.
Yeah.
It is.
Which,
What is he looking at? Oh.
that's like a classic design, it may not be
Yeah.
something
Yeah,
you
and
Because I
want,
think
but-
both those houses are pretty
they don't
new.
necessarily fit the
Right, so one's in and one's
historic
out.
bill. Both are probably built in the last
Yeah, it's definitely the Gorton house. there.
60 years.
Anyway, I just found that unusual.
Identified by former residents. Whatever the house is in between there.
Show me where the missing
So-
piece
Just right in
is.
between, this is the top of the next, this would be the Gorton house. So at the bottom of historic number 1, there's just a little space right there.
That's the same one you and I were looking at here.
But this one, or this, you're saying this.
It's this one right there. This one, yeah, that one.
If you look at these two maps,
So what do we,
the
Right,
house
if
that's
that were
circled on
included,
both of
then
them.
if you
you'd
look
have,
at both,
Oh,
yeah.
God, okay.
This
Oh,
is-
now I'm
this
seeing
little
it.
top.
This looked hatched to me from, okay, got it.
So yeah, just one little
If you
spot in
wanna
between
zoom
there
in.
somehow.
She can do it. But he's looking at actual houses. You're looking at Google Maps or something, and you can see
So
pictures.
Yeah.
that little circle,
it's that little ranch that's at the driveway of the Gordon.
this little circle.
What road is it?
It's right on College Highway, right above the Lyman Mill, right before former, right, well, coming from Westfield,
that is
former road's on your left,
So
so it's
this
a big house
one's
on the
not,
right.
Okay,
that's the
yes.
excluded
Okay.
one.
Well,
But this
I
one is
see.
included, the one with the flat
And
roof.
that's my thing,
Okay.
if that one's
All right.
included, it should be
Well, that one I could see,
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Well, I'm
we're
wondering.
defining
Right on.
historic is not necessarily old, but something
Right.
architecturally significant, maybe the flat roof that's got a,
Well, I can say that the Lockville district is much more recent. And so when they established that, the center district was established, it probably says in here, and much more recently, the Lockville. So in creating the new district, they left out that non-conforming house, more than likely, and started it at the Gordon house.
2001 is the Lockville Historic District.
Right.
I see.
Interesting.
And it says that the center district was
Yeah, it's the other
1991.
user hand.
So it was a 10-year time span, so.
So you might be pushing, if that's something. Remember the windows on the side though. Right now, there's no shutters. All right. It's mentioned in here, it's not,
Yeah, that,
the different ones.
well, I looked at that too, Chris.
It's close, but it's not, I don't think so. so.
The land around it doesn't look right. And that extension on the back, but that original kitchen could have come
Yeah,
off.
When did Celebrate North Southampton?
yeah. But this is, it's this is
Celebrate
the actual one, the
Southampton.
Aliens are handing out.
I had read that, I was like, I don't know if I ever heard of it.
Yeah,
That's
and
the
that's,
current.
That's in there.
Yes.
I'm not sure.
which is the same directory.
I had read that, and I was like, I don't know if that's still,
That whole side, that one is go all the way
is
down.
Celebrate
See,
Southampton
Central District is the only one
I
saying.
think it took place.
Celebrate Southampton?
That's
I don't
a
know.
little less
exists?
than that. There's nothing over here. 'cause
Yes, it does talk about it, yeah.
This is it. It's a terrible
They had
photograph, but
celebrated.
you recognize that zigzag.
There's
thing.
nothing-
And
there's
that
nothing
is
there,
the- it,
No.
you know.
It's not big happening.
It's the real.
So as a select board member, I would definitely recommend you guys looking into doing that.
Doing it, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll have to get a special permit.
Sure you can figure out a way.
So, what else do we need to talk about?
I think if we get this thing done, we should celebrate Southampton.
There you go.
Yeah, I didn't know when that was.
The scenic view.
well, I had read that, and they're talking about, oh, in modern times, they do memory art. I'm like, I don't know. That was-
We have all the scenic
Modern
views
starts
properly
in the
identified.
19th.
Right, I don't know if that. Modern
for your
I don't know if
The
that.
scenic road.
Well, it says scenic views worthy of protection.
Oh, yeah, no, that has not, that it is more under the cultural council,
Yeah.
Concom. Not historical commission necessarily. It could include some. Historic areas.
Has there ever been regulations, and you may have just asked this, and could have been somewhere else. Has there been any movement towards regulating or restricting development in those areas? The scenic view and scenic road areas?
I don't think there's been any effort to restrict development anywhere.
Okay.
I think it's been pretty, it just goes on wherever a parcel is sold, and I think
Okay.
that is a good, I mean, based on the overall master plan, that would be a good component to work on.
Well, the restrictions include chapter lands and whether or not the whole thing about giving the town the first right of refusal, that's one restriction. And then some people have put conservation restrictions on their lands, right?
But I think this is calling for an overview of the town designating areas, identifying areas that have value, like the Glendale, that whole, all of Glendale Road through the agricultural area, as an area, a location that's desirable to keep as a scenic road. And then it's identified in here as well that coming into Southampton from Westfield, that also has been designated as an
Yeah,
area.
because they have Pleasant Street on here, for instance, and there's been 2 developments, right? And major, large home construction.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious if there's been any sort of pushback because of the view. You still get the view, but there's no houses in between, the mountains and your
Exactly.
car.
Yeah.
I don't think it's been addressed at all to date, but it certainly has been outlined in the master plan, but the master plan has not yet been implemented.
Now, has there ever been, and maybe it does exist already, like a cross-reference between the properties identified by the master plan and all the chapter properties that are on record in the assessor's
I
office,
think
and then assign some
The op-
priority order to
The
it?
Open Space Review Committee is
It has done that?
not yet done, but looking in that direction. We'd like to see that happen. We recently are putting together to apply for a grant that would help bring together landowners, heirs of land, and hopefully start to prioritize whether it's scenic from a view standpoint, a road standpoint, something that we want consistent with the master plan to be protected. I think that's what the Open Space Review Committee is doing what they can. So far hasn't, and Barbara's on that committee too, so I mean, we're moving in that direction to try to prioritize that.
Yeah. That would give some, I think, guidance for now and into the future, because everybody was like, well, it's available, but is it, one of the priority properties or not? I think that would help
Yeah.
a lot.
On page 74 of the open space chapter, the third paragraph, the community should also prioritize lands currently enrolled at
See,
61.
I didn't make it up. Somebody is a great mind here. They planned it.
Your
But that's right,
74 is
yes.
different. No, it's not, it's the same, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it is something that is put forth in this, and it's one of the things that I'm sure we'll be considering. And as Cindy says, open space has taken heed of page 74.
I'm just trying to see if it's one of the goals that they listed in that chapter. Yes.
Oh, yeah, on page 78,
Yes.
428.
4.2, yep,
Yeah.
there it is.
It'd be-
Okay.
And 41C, update regulations to better protect priority natural resources and farmland.
Yeah.
We're already drifting into the next
I know
chapter.
you're working on next month's homework.
Yeah. But to jump back to George's question about do we have Celebrate Southampton, it used to be called Old Home Days. And it was in August every year, and it was a huge, East Street was kind of blocked off, and people came out, we had picnic tables, and people would come out, and it was just a huge town picnic. And it lasted for years. I've got pictures of my grandparents attending that back in the, God knows what year.
It's a good question. I mean, the other thing is that something like that encompasses some of the goals here as well. They talk about community events, community art, reaching out to the public. Those types of events are, there needs to be sort of diverse things to do, right? So there's going to be kids walking around, so there's going to be kid events, but, local things, historic things. Part of the goals can be accomplished during something like that.
And there's just a lack of interest that caused it to
Yeah.
kind of fade out. Lack of attendance and lack of organizers. But it used to be a whole weekend event. A ball game between the married men versus the singles.
Yeah, I'm reading.
Saw that, please.
And there was always an art display at the church, and they refer to Memory Hour here. And
Some award for, the longest resident in Southampton, or the one who came from farthest away, or
yeah,
the youngest one in attendance, or all sorts of things.
it moved off of East Street. They no longer closed off East Street when the Conant Park, when the pavilion was erected.
I was just thinking, right, there's events that happen in the summer there now, and it could be something that is done from a...
But it needs more community interest.
Yeah.
And that is one comment that Bob had for me. A lot of these goals require a good deal of volunteer work, and I think it's generally agreed that most young people don't have too much of an interest in historic. But I mean, historical society is floundering. It is really struggling to keep that differs from the commission in that they're a private association, I guess, and that actually brings to mind on strategy 3.2C. Bob feels that the Historical Society has the best collection of historical information. But, and that when he has been to the Edwards Library to see if they would house such a collection, he said that he was told that it was not a research library. And so, there has been talk for quite some time about what would happen to the
Where is it now? Where are the stuff now?
It's the Society at the Clark Chapman House.
Oh, I-
And then there's a lot of the town-owned material in the schoolhouse that's owned by the town in Conant Park, the little
Oh,
schoolhouse.
the one had been moved.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's where the many of the contents are that are under the auspices of the commission, and then the collection that is owned by the society is in Clark Chapman.
Why are there two different organizations? I mean, I know one is town appointed, but
So
I'm not sure I understand the distinction.
the mandate for the commission is to protect the historical assets of Southampton. The society is a private organization that records the history of Southampton and holds other important belongings. But if they cannot survive, there is a question as to what will become of their holdings, including the building. So,
They being the society.
yes, the society. And so, Margaret, to specifically answer your question, I believe, I don't know why that is, but I think all towns have historical commissions and societies.
I just wasn't sure of the definition of duties. It wasn't clear to me from this.
Tell me the definition of commission again?
To protect the historical assets of the town.
How much, I guess, I've only seen the society advertising lately, just in terms of the Festival of Trees or whatever they were doing there, but I don't think that there's that much publicity that I'm aware of, at least, about whatever their activities may be that would invite people to even get interested in history of Southampton. I mean, is it active, or is it?
Well, they hold events annually. So 4th of July is the ice cream social.
Right.
And not so very long ago, it was hand-cranked ice cream.
Oh, yeah.
And now not. And then it's open Sunday afternoons throughout the summer.
That's about it.
And what advertises that is the open flag, essentially. For many years, the Historical Commission opened the schoolhouse on Sunday afternoons as well, and attendance for the season, all season, might be two, just very, to the point where it didn't. We've more or less stopped, except on the 4th. And it's a terrible shame that building, which lacks water facilities, cannot be used or isn't being utilized in some way to...
There is one way it's being utilized. Virginia goes down and brings the 5th graders or the 4th graders.
I'm going to say that the grammar school kids go. So
Yeah.
But that's just once a year. 2 different classes typically do, but it's only, it's underutilized.
Yeah, that's the only exposure like Norris kids get is that one field trip.
Right.
I didn't know all of this stuff before I read it. Any of it.
I mean, you can't expect people to be interested in the history of Southampton if they don't know that there is a history of Southampton. So it's like, I mean, whatever I
And
learned was...
Virginia Earhart, in my opinion, just does so much that she can possibly do. And am I right? She's like the person that does it?
Well,
Nobody else has-
there are other
others?
teachers who have religiously brought their students over the course of years, and there was one in particular who did for many years. She may have retired or moved on.
Mrs. Anna,
I can't remember.
she brought us 2nd grade. That was a long time.
Yeah, I just have one comment on the Cultural Council, because I used to run the Cultural Council for Southampton. And that's just that they don't pay for literature for the library, so I'm not sure what that was supposed to mean, but you can't do that. Support project, that's on page 53. It's just a minor thing that they what funds are for. They're for projects or art supplies and that kind of thing, literature. We pay for events in Edwards.
Oh, so it's an error that it says.
Yep.
The
It's for
literature.
the literature.
Correct.
I see.
Just by way of accomplishments, and I don't know what goal this is, but this is the state inventory of historic places, and we are up to date with this inventory. And Macris is the online inventory, M-A-C-R-I-S. And
M-E?
MACRIS. And so regarding the strategy of updating old and outdated inventory sheets, that has pretty much been accomplished. There is, it has been recently updated, and there is not much left to do on that, but it's an ongoing thing. As houses reach their 100th year, then the properties are put on.
But there's no other restrictions. So if somebody had a house that was 102 years old, and they didn't like it, and they wanted to raise it, and
That's what's happening over in Fulmer Road. So now with the demolition delay bylaw, that can be delayed, but only for a year. And if no alternative can be agreed upon, then they can proceed.
Does everybody know about this cane downstairs that's on display across from the select board room? There's a little case, glass case,
Yeah.
that has a black cane in it, and it goes to the oldest living person in the town. And that person recently passed away, so now it goes to the next, I mean, it's oldest living person in terms of a tradition.
But I thought it used to be in the possession of them. If it's in a glass case, it's sort of meaningless, is it not?
Yeah, I think
not
it's
getting
there.
much
I think
use.
their name, they get their name on a plaque and the years.
Gee,
It's-
I'm going to hazard the guess that it used to be in the oldest person's
Its
possession.
possession.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's there now.
Which makes
and it's a series of plaques, it's, interesting.
And it would be awarded, I think, at Old Home Days,
Yeah, I think so.
Okay,
passed along when
I
the
see.
time
Oh, it all
came.
comes full circle here, doesn't it? I like it. So, strategy 31C, what's happening with that?
Well, given that the properties have been inventoried, you can't necessarily expand the number of historic sites. I didn't...
Until they get old enough, though.
Exactly. So that's an ongoing process. And so it's a little hard for me to decipher how that could be implemented, given that we are up to date with, well, it's suggesting that they go on to, I'm sorry, I was reading that wrong.
Register, right.
Getting it onto the National Register. Okay, so we did achieve that with the Center Cemetery fairly recently. We also tried Cedarhurst, and the owner of that pulled out after a while for privacy reasons. And then the Kingsley House, which is where the Kozubs live across from the cemetery, that was considered as well, but it's a non-conforming building because it has vinyl siding on it. So it couldn't be, yes. And,
Which building was that again?
Conrad's? No.
yeah,
Conrad's, really?
Conants, yeah.
Soapbox? Is it a soapbox?
It's to the left of the horse farm.
It's
Yeah,
the
right
original.
Right next to
White
Grandstand.
House, okay.
setback.
It's
Yes.
got vinyl side fences or not?
And that,
See it in the road.
what's
You
that?
can't see the vinyl siding from the...
No,
because-
it's way back, yeah.
No.
No, but it disqualified it as a, from being on the state register, national register.
Was that house moved? That's just such an odd position for an old house like that. They're usually right on the road. Just,
That's the original farmhouse stall of what is now Grindstone. And I don't know whether it was moved back or not.
What is this about eligibility for matching grants? So I was saying to increase eligibility, do you get, do they look at you more kindly the more?
If it's
Yeah,
registered.
if it's on the register.
So we wouldn't want to tell a private owner that they had to do something, but you mentioned one of the properties, Cedarhurst, the private owners chose to not participate because of privacy reasons. So if it had been named a historic property,
How does that affect?
yeah, how would that have affected their privacy? Would they have had to
Photography.
allow photography? I see.
I believe that's true. She, the owner, pursued it, and then for some reason withdrew, halted her pursuit. And I believe it concerned the necessary photography.
Okay.
And do you know about that, Barbara, to be able to verify
No,
that?
I do
I don't want to speak incorrectly,
Right.
but there was a reason that did not go.
I do have a question though. Is that to be eligible, it must be in the historic district?
Well,
Or is it age only?
no, it does not have to be in the historic district. I don't believe. And there was a question of its actual historic value because of the age of the buildings. It's historically of interest to Southampton because of what it was. It was the public swimming hole, and the original buildings are apparently the locker room is still there, and there was a little store, snack
Yep.
store.
Entire
As a
summers were spent there.
And swimming lessons were given there. But the buildings themselves, I don't think necessarily qualified age-wise yet.
You wait long enough and more.
Are these the only things on the historic register, or no? Are some of the older houses, other older houses?
Well, all of it, they're, the historic register, the historic districts
No,
are on the historic register.
But the
National
cemetery's
Register.
on the
National.
National Register.
Yes.
And that's 1730 something, so are there other houses?
Not individual houses, I don't believe, and I think that states that in here.
It does. Yeah.
Oh, so the cemetery is the only thing on the National Register.
No, the historic districts are. There are no individual houses, such as the Fowles House, the,
I was looking for the list
of,
houses.
Any idea how many there are? Just out of curiosity? I mean, how many?
oh, I can't tell you right
Yeah.
now.
So would that particular property be a candidate for a historic building?
Grant, you mean?
Well, that
Oh.
Southampton could name it a Southampton Historical. Because there wouldn't necessarily have to be age as opposed to the connection to the town, right? Is that
Well, it
anything that we
wouldn't go,
could do?
well, I
it's
don't
not. I don't-
possibly so.
Kingsley is the one.
It wouldn't go on the national or state list.
Right.
But, yeah, Southampton, I think. I don't know that there's anything existing where we would make designations as to what are important, but I think that's part of isn't that one of the,
Well, there's adopt a local historic district,
Yeah,
there's
that's
things
the
like
one-
that, but I'm talking about specific properties
Yeah.
that might be important to us that haven't.
Yeah.
well, it does indicate to develop a municipal municipal preservation plan,
So that might be a target for that.
yeah, which would, calls for identifying historical and cultural resources.
Yeah. Because, I mean, actually, I mean, the property on Wolcott and Palmer Meadow is not part of the historic district.
Correct.
At all.
It's not.
And yet it's one of the oldest houses in town, and it's been restored to pretty much original shape. And so it's non-protected per se. I mean, luckily, the same people have had it for a long time now. But, I mean, it just seems like there may be others like that around town, too, that are
Well,
not
nothing-
necessarily in a
there's-
district.
Being in a district or being designated on the historic register isn't really a protection.
But it would be something that, well, I guess it would be up to the owners, that if they wanted that, the privacy issue, like you said, if that was somebody felt that was an invasion to be listed and have people come by and look at the house, or not tour it necessarily, but, or open it a couple of days a year for a tour or something like that. I suppose that would be an imposition for some people that wouldn't want that notoriety
Well,
perhaps.
there's,
But it could be something for the town, I guess is what I'm saying, as a PR thing for the town.
Yeah, right.
because I think a district would restrict at least what you can do with the building, right? Historic designation is one thing, but, you know, they're talking about on 31E, and what we were talking about earlier, how a local historic district can be very, we were talking about how restrictive it could be.
Being on the national and state, this is my understanding of it, it doesn't really stop an owner from doing what they want. What it means is that they cannot get state or national funds to assist. So let me think of an example.
So you're talking about the historical register? Right.
Well, you think about the house right out here, right? So that's in a historic district. It's got vinyl clapboard siding on it, I think. You know, it might not be historically relevant to the time frame of the neighboring houses, but they renovated it. It's,
You mean
Oh, you mean the old store?
on the corner there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
so I mean, there's obviously things that they've done to the house. The house looks good, looks, you know, great, but it's not necessarily historically aligning with the other 3 or 4 next to
I
it,
think
right?
if that were an established local historic district, that wouldn't have happened.
If it was a local district, that may well not have happened, given if that was within the guidelines of the historic district.
It's all
Yes.
locally designed.
But on page 59 of that chapter, the last, before we go into chapter 4, it talks about funding and grants. The second one down, Massachusetts Preservation Projects Fund would be a state-funded 50% reimbursable matching grant, which would support the preservation of properties, landscapes, and sites listed in the State Register of Historic Places. So should the town wish to see something preserved, if it's in the State Register of Historic Places, we could apply for one of those grants.
And a prime example of that, I believe, would be the old town hall.
Right. So I worked on a project, it was in a Heritage State Park, and they wanted to redo the siding on like 2 of the 3 buildings, and we had to, the application was extensive. There was a lot of work that had to go into it. You know, architects had to be hired for the design and the specification, and it needed, I want to say it was Dutch lap siding. It wasn't your everyday, it wasn't shiplap or any of your everyday type of siding that required a specific one that was originally installed. And I don't think we even ended up getting it. I don't remember completing the project, like actually doing the siding work
Was this in
itself.
Southampton?
Different town.
Different town,
But,
okay.
yeah, it was a similar thing, right? So this was on the state registry, and it could have been on a national, or I'm not really positive, I don't remember, but you know, it was definitely something we looked into because you could revitalize the outside and have some funding to help. It's good, like you said, for the police station, the old town hall.
Hasn't that been looked into, though, by the Historic Commission? Wasn't Bob looking into a way to use some kind of funding for the old town hall, for the
Nothing,
Preservation of it, didn't I remember
well,
that from the meeting?
nothing can be pursued until the fate of the police station
The safety
has been
complex.
determined, because you can't move ahead, and the town can't move ahead without
They need a place for the police station, right?
or to know whether that's going to be renovated as the police station.
They need a plan.
Yeah, we need a
A
plan.
master plan.
And in the meantime, that building is
That's a separate master plan.
That was actually on the agenda for George to take care of, right? To discuss.
One thing I did find in here, so if you we talk about the historical society interest and how do you get people engaged, and then you read about the sort of lack of the community event, Celebrate Southampton.
Yes.
Which, if you think about where Conant Park is, like, my family's been down there, it's nice. In the summer, they do events and things. Like, it seems like one of those opportunities that, while it takes interest, it's something that could be capitalized on, and you'd be able to complete a lot of these goals sort of on a yearly basis. It takes effort, right? It takes people who want to set up and do presentations and open the school, Clark Chapman. Right. To open those up during that time, whether it's Saturday day or Saturday evening, whatever it is. But it just strikes me as one of those things. It's not listed here as a goal or strategy, but some sort of community event that encompasses some of those. Like, it talked about art too. Like, where do we display public art?
Well, that used to be part of old
Right.
days. There'd be a big art display, and any local
Yep.
artist
Yep.
could
Right.
hang their wares.
Emily Gill.
But we do have in the town something, I can't tell you when it started, but it's been going on for a few years. It's the weekend right after Mother's Day, when there's all the flea market tag
Oh,
sale
yeah.
stuff, plant sale, and then the library does their library sale, bake sale, and then the church has in the past, or maybe will do their own flea market kind of sale. I'm on the library trustees, and we were approached by the president of the East Hampton, Southampton Rotary, who happens to be a town resident. That's Amanda Kemp. And she's the president this year, and she can choose the fundraising event for her tenure. And she has chosen to do a walk run that will benefit the library. And that, I know that's the planning is underway. That could be, another sort of kickoff event or part of an event. Not everybody can run 5K.
Yeah.
Or walk 5K even. But anyway, it seems to me some things are happening, but maybe need to be coordinated
Right.
in a better way. Some things are, it's lovely from a historic standpoint, but a little bit passé. That, what I'm saying, things that happened 100 years ago may not draw people.
Well, that is true, but I would counter that by saying maybe to shut off East Street again and
Right.
Sure.
set it up as one big picnic.
Yeah.
Would be
Yeah.
more appealing than going to the pavilion at Conant Park. It certainly changed
And it was,
the appeal
from
for-
the beginning here down to just a bit past the town hall. I mean, that's,
Correct.
or the police station.
Right.
That's about
So it
more
would
or
be
less.
up to Clark Street,
Yeah, something
essentially,
like
that
that.
was
Up to
closed
there.
And I
off.
think if
Pretty
you
much.
kind of contain it to a one-day
Yeah.
type of thing, then
Yeah.
that's a little bit easier to organize.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, a whole weekend
Yeah.
sounds so daunting.
There were.
Right.
I think community events like that are good though, because you look at Northampton, they
Yeah.
shut down. People want to come to that.
Well, it was publicized such that people that had moved away from town, it was Old Home Day, so people that had moved away came back specifically for that weekend.
I
just to-
believe they were the organizers.
Yeah, well, they might have been. I mean,
Would
we
that
know
be
too.
something like, I don't know, since we belong to the Chamber of Commerce with East Hampton, would that be something they could help us organize?
I don't know. I mean, it's definitely an economic event too,
Yeah.
right? So you're going to have a
Vendors.
vendors,
there.
farmer market type thing. There's people going to be selling things. It's definitely something that could be tied into that. Obviously locally, and if
Yeah.
if it helps to bring in outside vendors, maybe East Hampton, the Chamber of Commerce can help do that.
Yeah, I mean, no, but we're part of that.
Right.
I'm thinking that they might have be able to offer us some assistance and some guidance. I'm not saying.
Is there any historic
necessarily
date coming up for the town? I mean, is there any,
The church just had
yeah,
their,
the church, right?
and I'm
But
not,
anything else that's,
When will we establish?
trying to think if there was something that might be happening around the corner in the next couple of years that we could think about. To organize around is what I'm thinking about.
But that's something I think to be looked at, because it accomplishes goals in this chapter. It makes steps towards accomplishing other goals, right? So
Yeah.
if no one knows about the historical history of the town, you have this area where there's pictures, and people can see things, right? See what the town looked at, and then, maybe it draws more attention to the other areas. And
I think stories from people that have had families that have been
Sure.
in the area for a long time.
that's memory hour,
Right,
George.
you know a lot
What
more
is
about-
memory hour?
It was 10 o'clock on that Saturday morning, and someone would, it would be a town gathering, and someone would volunteer to tell their stories.
We'd have to do an inventory of who's around.
I know, we're in now,
No, we're not in, no.
Or Mr.
Around the hook.
Hendrick.
Hendrick, and
Hendricks,
he's
yeah.
quite a
Definitely,
speaker, I hear.
definitely.
He is.
Yeah, Ted Hendricks for sure, yeah. But Pinky Parsons was the one I learned any history from, and he was the strawberry man, kind of right across from the current post office. So there,
I think if you had really animated stories from a really animated speaker, that would draw some of the younger crowd. Like, "Oh, that's really
Yeah.
cool."
Well, Mr. and Mrs. Hendrick wrote a book, quite a nice, and it's quite a nice picture book.
in Southampton.
Yeah, and if that were more widely available.
Where is that?
Pretty interesting.
Is it one of those series of things, like they have one on East Hampton?
Yep.
And where is it? Where can I get my hands on that?
Probably must be one at the library. I don't know. I would hope. I'll bring it next time.
Town on the Mandan, that's what
Yeah.
you're looking for?
There's
that
that
the
one.
name of it?
There's another one.
No, that's
There's
a
two.
different one.
There's two. Yeah, there's another one. But there's one on Southampton itself that's mostly pictures. The old houses, the old businesses, the old school, the, people and family in town. Yeah, I've got to bring it on.
so with that, just because we have had, I think, some good discussion, some good notes, I'm gonna, if everyone's okay, move on to the next item. I think we've had a great discussion. I'm really happy you were able to attend, because it probably would have been a much shorter conversation. But it's been good, and I think it definitely helps tie into some of the other chapters, and when we start going through everything, I think this will definitely play a good role.
Did we find out if we're on Wikipedia or not? Are we updated?
We are, but we're not updated.
Yeah, there's only like 3 categories,
Oh, so
3 sections.
is the historical part on there?
No.
No, okay.
So next item, and I did modify the agenda a little bit. Next item was old business. So I'll keep an old business list. Some of the old business is for conversation's sake, to bring up at the meeting for people who may have been missed. Some of it is old business that we'll continue to work on. Some old business may just disappear one day because it's been tabled so long, we don't even talk about it, so we'll move on. One of the items I had here, survey design and strategy. So, we discussed some of the other survey information. I know we had sent around the link to the questions and everything.
Here's the link.
Or the
and then
data.
One of them was an attachment.
Yep, yes. So we have that. Thanks to our guest Barbara. We have more, which I will scan and email around to everyone. So we have, and these are more parts to the puzzle. One is from October 22nd, 2000, Southampton charrette summary. Charrette is it a gathering, or a small gathering of people to discuss ideas or something?
Yes, that was very interesting. I think there were like 5 tables, and you had 6 or 8 people on each table, and it was to talk about the goals, et cetera.
And there are some, so I have read through this. There are some interesting points in here. So you read this, and then you think about the survey questions and everything, and what's in the master plan. So I think it helps, but it might muddle a little bit too, some of the goals, because some are very contradictory. So I will.
That original surveys are, I believe, are available all of the questionnaires
Yeah.
and the surveys are still available.
Yeah, so, and then we have the survey results from 2001 with survey questions, so it gives you number of respondents, responses, similar questions to the survey results that you had said, similar questions. I haven't compared and contrasted, but more good information to kind of consider and talk about. So one thing, because there's a few people who weren't here last time, we have talked about reassessing the priority of the master plan. So it's been 8 years.
And the relevance of some of the goals.
Right.
Has changed.
So some groups are consistently working on these, some may not have been, and, you know, we found some items, some of the language in the plan is contradictory to itself, especially when you think of economic development versus rural character, and how do you tie those in, and a lot of different things. So we discussed having another survey. I guess we discussed the idea of the survey and threw out ways to survey. We didn't get into questions. We didn't get into any of that list making, because it's kind of a project on its own to put the survey together. So I will send this around, and it's just more information to think about, more information to help develop questions for when we get into that, which will hopefully be, early next year. I will send these around. Thank you very much. Very good information. Next, unless there's anything on survey.
I just want to make sure that we're not moving in the direction of sort of designing the master plan.
No.
And I think early on, Francine, you said, this was even before Mike came on board, we have this master plan. We're sort of committed to the master plan. Just want to remind ourselves that even if the survey should bring out a different set of priorities, what would that mean?
Right.
But I don't think unless and until we go through and really get a good read
Yeah.
on what has been accomplished or what hasn't been and why, that would help us put together to maybe realign or develop other questions to people, because there may be some things that absolutely cannot be done. And there may be some things that we've done that could be enhanced, and we would want to put those forward. It's going to be, but it's all part of understanding all of this
Yes, it
first.
is. Yes, it is.
And gathering, doing the research that we have to do on the status of each of these, a huge number of goals here.
Yeah.
I mean, really.
Yeah.
So, and then the other thing is that unfortunately, we will have missed the opportunity to get the free mailing. That's
Oh, for
only
this
one
year.
time, for this year.
Yeah.
And,
But I think we felt we weren't ready either.
Yeah.
Right.
I think so.
We don't know what
We're not
to
ready.
Because I wouldn't have thought about
No.
the community event, right? But I would want to ask
Yeah,
that.
maybe.
On the questionnaire, how many of you would show up to a community event?
yeah,
I mean, you want the honest answer,
Right. But
would you like a community event? Sure, I'd like one. Are you going to show up? No.
Well, because you've just brought up community event again, and it's really a good idea, don't forget we have the Memorial Day ceremony event, which has a whole bunch of little pieces. It's possible
To
to
build on
add
that.
something
Right.
onto that, just as a sort of trial balloon, to see how it
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
went, just because it's already being advertised, and it's, anyway, that's just
Yeah.
about.
Definitely.
I'm okay with that as a trial balloon. I have some strong feelings about having like a tag sale type environment at a Celebrate Southampton thing. So that's just a personal preference about the kind,
Well, the Memorial Day thing isn't a tax sale type of environment.
I thought that was when we said.
That was the other one I said.
the
That was
fan sale.
after.
Oh, that was another one.
That was after
Got it.
Mother's Day weekend.
Mother's Day,
But then
got
there's
it.
Memorial Day, which is, Memorial Day,
Okay.
31st of May
Right.
time period.
Okay.
That's the
That
one where
that
we have the
makes more
little
sense.
parade, and we have the thing in the cemetery, and
Right.
Including the bear.
And the bear came, yes, it was the bear. I heard the bear came. And then the church has a pancake thing, I
Yeah.
think, for a couple of.
Because that might be something that,
Something
that
like
makes more
That would
sense
be
to
a
me
good
than
sign,
the other
yeah.
thing.
Two different things,
Yes,
yeah.
thank you for
And
clarifying.
the destination could be here. I mean, if we wanted to have a gathering, it could be
Yeah.
here in this parking lot, per se.
Could be,
You know,
yeah.
it strikes me one way to sort of get some historical motivation going. It hit me this year, and tying right into what you're saying about Memorial Day. If you guys, going through East Hampton this year, there were all those flags from the World War II. Remember
yes,
that?
yes.
I thought that was a wonderful
I
idea.
do
Yes.
too.
I
Yeah.
would love to see us do something like that here.
That is good, but you know what crossed my mind? That's distracting, as I'm trying to look at the names and so forth. My eyes are not on the road.
But they have
But
that
it was-
downtown walking district.
Yeah.
Right.
Where you could go, or
Well,
it
that's true.
It could be, yeah, it could
you go so
designate some
slowly
place,
there
but-
that you can't watch.
I just thought it was a great,
Yes.
great idea, and I think,
Yeah.
you know, you could promote that here and get some interest going there. That would maybe start the juices flowing in terms of getting some interest in history and knowing what happened around here. And tying it into Memorial Day would be really interesting, but again, lots of planning and thought and effort. But
Yes.
I just thought that however they put that together, it was just really well done, I thought. And I think the families, from my understanding, the families paid for the flags. and- Yeah, so it was just, you know, it was voluntary, I guess, in that regard.
Would it be possible to survey on the goals themselves instead of just like kind of arbitrary things? Not arbitrary, but like things
So-
that were
Not
meant
as
to
targeted.
develop the goals.
So I think you probably could with some,
Yeah.
but
not
there's so
all.
much background information on a lot of those goals, it might be difficult. You know, you're asking someone to take a 5-minute survey, and today, that's asking a lot.
Yeah.
It really, I mean, it isn't, we know it isn't, but for some people it is, and then for them to do the research and some of the reading behind the survey, it may, you know, I think there's some questions that, there's some of the goals that should absolutely be in there, right? Is, how do you feel about this? Is this something we should pursue?
Is this a paper survey, not an online, or,
To be determined, maybe even mix of both?
sorry if I missed that, sorry,
Yeah, so we talked about
combining.
maybe multiple different avenues. You know, one, anything online is, data's collated by itself, right? So we're not thumbing through 1,000 surveys. And then with the paper version, we talked about having that available and making it accessible, and then you're, you know, manually inputting a portion, but,
Right.
yeah, so some sort of.
I've designed a lot of surveys.
Respond
online
by
survey
paper
stuff.
or go online.
Yeah.
But Barbara said that the group that analyzed all the data was from what college locally?
It was a professor from UMass.
Who got
But
students
the
together as a
emphasis
project?
was on economic
Okay,
development.
okay.
Right.
But so many other things came out of it. And Jackie Sears, I believe, has all of the original survey questionnaires. And there were wonderful things, suggestions on how the town could be improved, and just very good suggestions. And collating the number of responses, I think, overlooked the beauty of the responses because they were so positive. And I think she still has those.
So, you know, it's something we want to come back to, just not this year.
Right.
Sometime in 2019. And we'll come full circle and we'll, I'm sure, get into how and what and when and all that. But look forward to that. But no. Project and task tracker. So I heard you may be putting something together for that. Awesome. So that's good. One of the things we talked about the last couple of weeks was, you know, going chapter by chapter, but then also having the sort of tracker, right? Some sort of visual of done, not done, green,
Yes.
yellow, red,
That's
whatever
why
it
I
ends up
wanted that
being.
list of things that you have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that'll be something we will probably use for like a report out mechanism for the select board, I would think. And then something that's a good community item as well. It can be posted, it can be shared, this is what we've done.
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, you know, Robert Floyd's newsletters, a good way maybe to get some information out to people, plus the Facebook page.
The website, I mean, even, MyTownGov, I think you can post information on there, like documents themselves, not just meeting minutes, I think.
Yeah, I think so. If there's a
'Cause there's a
drop down on the
document.
left for other,
Right.
for all the committees, I would think we
Yeah.
possibly could. If not, we could
You probably
find out
need
how we
that
could do it.
fancy password,
I
though,
do.
for that code.
Or
Well,
fancy,
if somebody else
really.
wanted to
Or we
use.
could have Art put it on the town website.
Right.
They
Yeah.
could load it on.
But making some of those things available so
Yeah.
that people can become a little more engaged, but prior to the survey or whatever we end up doing, right?
The other thing is I did visit, East Hampton Media, who provides this equipment and broadcasting, so to speak. I had an open house, and I went to meet the new executive director a couple of weeks ago. And they have facilities where we could do some of our own programming. So I think some of these ideas kind of lend itself
Oh, that's
to that
nice.
channel
Yeah.
191. They'll give you the technical assistance, they'll, help with the production. I mean, there's a lot that we could do to communicate with people and to educate people in the community using, that as one of the
It's a
mechanisms.
great idea.
There's one drawback, and that's many people are giving up their cables. I'm one of them. I don't have a cable anymore. I do streaming. You don't have a cable anymore.
Well,
I have cable
Is
until
there
the day
another way
after
to
the Super
access
Bowl.
it, though?
Yeah, you
Then I
can,
cancel it.
everything that is recorded is on the town website.
Oh, so you can go on there and
So
watch
I
it.
think once we produce
Oh,
it, it
that's
could be
right.
housed there as
Yeah.
well.
And what's that called? It starts with V or something? It's
Vimeo.
Vimeo. Oh, yeah, okay. Now I know the answer. Okay. I
Right?
can't watch it live streaming, but we can go to Vimeo and
Mm-hmm.
look for it. Okay.
Hook it up to YouTube.
YouTube. Yeah.
Right, that's another, I was just thinking that, I was curious if they had a YouTube channel, because some of the local newses do. They don't always update them, but you can watch Channel 22 or Channel 40 on YouTube and not have cable.
Facebook or Instagram.
There is a way. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
But, well, that's good. Good stuff. So project and task tracker, ongoing, good. Any old business I may have forgotten? Okay, new business, report out to select board. So I did do a quick report out last week. All
You
of
did a
them
very
had,
good job
all of
on
them
it.
had read the entire master plan, they were well prepared. So, yeah, I just did a quick report out of it. I did stress that, while they may not read the whole thing, some of the information in the back and in the appendixes, it's a good overview of sort of where we are, the statistics behind some of it, and it's good to look into. There's things from traffic studies to just all sorts of statistic information back there. Now, it is a little dated, it's from when this was done, but kind of gives them an idea of where some of that is. So I think the only question that came up was from Jim, right, about PVPC?
Yes, if
And about-
their assistant's still available.
Yep, and assistance available, and Francine had actually answered it, just saying that, their PVPC always has an interest to help, but you need to know what you need from them, which we don't necessarily know right now, and then you work the avenue of the funding, so.
And they said that they would seek funding on our behalf to get a project going.
Well, that's great.
But we have to come up with a project.
Right,
and-
we have to be more specific. It's a chicken and egg kind
Yep.
of going.
Yep, and we did, it kind of outlined how the process in which we're going through this, chapter by chapter, the task tracker, sort of to follow concurrently and to catch up with the chapters, and we'll do another report out sometime next year, early next year, just to give them an update of things, and hopefully by that time we'll have a better look of what we've completed, and then maybe there's, I think once you go through all this, there's going to be goals and opportunities that may just be as simple as, can you do this, right? Can you have this posted? Can you have someone follow up and, do this bit of research that's needed? Some of these may be easier than originally anticipated, and they may help get some done. Now, they may not be the the big impressive goals, but it might be something else, so.
You know, along the PVPC thing, it came up at the planning board when we had the hearing on the marijuana, the adult use marijuana the other night. The person that I think you met with, Susan Westa, when you made her first
No, I
contact.
only spoke with
Oh, you
her
spoke on the phone with her? She actually has put in her resignation with PVPC. She was only there for 8-9 months or something. The piece I got out of this came from Larry Smith, who is working with PVPC. He's been there a long, long time, but he's retired. He's working on a consulting basis at this point to help us through our marijuana bylaws part. But what he said was that the temporary individual they hope to get, and I wrote down his last name, but I can't remember it off the top of my head, is a very seasoned and competent planner. And I'm thinking that if we got our act together and knew what we wanted, and if there was funding, and we could do it, we're going to get somebody who really knows what they're doing to help us. That's my point.
That'd be
Bring it
great.
out. I forgot what the guy's name was that he said, do you remember what he said, hopefully the substitute would be, it would only be temporary.
Yeah.
That man wouldn't be available for a long time, but my ears perked up because all of this requires really, you know,
Someone who knows what
high,
they're doing.
yeah, high quality professionalism and knowing what they're doing and not a new grad. But
Yeah.
oh, I think it's
Okay, I'm not a new graduate.
Whatever we produce needs to be in a variety of formats,
That's
because people, everybody doesn't want this.
It's
So we
true.
need to
That's true.
do that.
Great, that's good. Other new business, we got some mail. Public body checklist for posting a meeting notice and public body checklist for creating and approving meeting minutes. So this is from Massachusetts General Law. I'm not sure why it was in the mailbox, but it was.
Probably because I asked the questions. I went to the town clerk when Janine was still there, and she told me to do this. And did she give me this? Maybe she just put it in your mailbox so that I would know how to do it.
Okay.
Is this an
That's for
extra
you.
copy
What's for you? I have copies from,
from other stuff?
Previous
Yeah.
endeavors,
I think
yeah.
that's what it is. She emailed them to me too, so I'm not sure if these are, but
you know, if she emailed them, I'll keep them.
I think we're all set, yeah.
Okay. I'll keep a copy just so we have them. Any other necessary business or new business that I did not have written down? Nothing. All right. If there's ever something that you feel needs to be on here and we're not in this meeting, just email me and we can add it under new business. We can always talk about it under item 8, any other necessary business, but I'd rather have it shown on there than use item 8 as the
You
agenda
took
line.
everybody's contact information last time.
I did,
right?
except George's.
Except George's, and that included phone numbers. So if you could just
Yes.
email it all out to us, then we'll have it ourselves.
You know,
want
I
to
came
call
in
it
early
in
to
between.
ask Ed for that sheet that we used to fill out.
Okay, yeah.
And
Is there,
I'm sorry, please.
was there any communication about this meeting, like, still happening? Because I only knew by going to the meeting website. I was just
So was your
curious.
Did you get my email this morning?
Yeah, but anything like before?
There wasn't anything else, I don't think.
do you
Was there a
subscribe to the
reminder?
alerts?
No.
So
Did you sign up for them? If you do online, it might,
yeah, so you can copy the calendar feed and just put it into your,
Okay, I
if
will do
it's
that.
Gmail or whatever you use for a calendar. So if you go to My Town Gov, I think there's a copy of the calendar feed link.
Okay, I was just
I
curious
guess we
if I
should have
did.
said that. Once we set the date,
Yeah, we didn't really.
the agenda and everything will be posted, and each individual will go online and take a look at it,
Yeah.
Thank you.
so that you know, okay.
Has there been any further development or communication with Concom to know how we might get some kind of representation from them?
I did talk to Ed. He said it was not possible to have an alternate. That was not.
So it's,
And we had to, we probably will need to either, probably end up having to meet with them en masse or invite them to one of our meetings. or have a joint meeting with them just to go over their section, since there doesn't seem to be anyone who's on that committee who is A, either available, or B, wants to participate on this committee. So we're going to have to be a little more aggressive in how we get to
But you
them.
did answer the question as to
Yes.
whether there could be
It's
rotating.
rotation, no. I'm sorry, I thought I told
Oh, maybe,
you
well,
last
it didn't
time. But yes.
sink in.
No, that's not
If you did.
possible. That would have been a great solution, but
Yeah, so we do have I'm going to say a large enough committee, and I'm not making commitments for anyone, but we have a large enough committee where attending one of their meetings isn't out of the question, George is the newest member, so he doesn't necessarily have any assigned groups, so, maybe he could help with one of those, right? So we all have certain, if you come from a committee, your committee is your responsibility in terms of report out. At-large members have
Personnel policies and procedures, hey.
different committees, so, we'll see when we get there, and if we have to schedule an attended meeting, I can go,
yeah,
or
we can
figure
do
something out. But, as a group that is making progress, I definitely want to, they're busy, they do a lot of things, and they are making progress on the master plan, so, it'd be great if they could have someone here. But we'll do what we can to help accommodate between now and then. This is information that gets sent to Ed and this group only, so it's not necessarily public information, because it does have contact information. It's more emergency purposes, and that way we all have each other's contact if needed. So.
Can you email that out again to
I haven't
everybody?
yet.
You haven't yet? You will?
Yeah,
Thank you. Did you just say that? And I didn't.
it's okay. But I will email it. I was just waiting for the last two, and I was going to send an email. All right, our next meeting is already scheduled for January 7th, 7 p.m.
Here.
Here are homework. I ask a lot. It's chapter 4 and 5. Yeah, I know. I'm getting a whole lot off. Just to help.
They don't seem very long.
Yeah, just to help move forward.
It's a good idea.
And then,
So there goes everybody's holiday.
yeah, no breaks.
January 17th?
Yep, 7 at 7.
No days,
Scrooge.
Throw in there now.
Monday the 7th?
Yeah.
Oh, I have school committee.
Okay.
That works.
That's tough. I mean, you're important. No, we're all important, but you're working on
We need your master list then.
But you wouldn't go to school committee then?
Yep. Oh, well,
So you-
is it the same night?
Monday.
It's
Yes,
the first Monday of the
7th.
month, you're right.
Correct.
Could we do a
you were
Tuesday?
worried about that last time.
I think I did mention that was a possibility.
So how,
Cemented.
What about the 8th?
yeah, what about the 8th?
Select board,
Oh, yeah.
What about the 14th?
that works.
That works for me.
That work for everybody?
All right.
That works.
Don't add another chapter, please.
Oh, man.
Extra week, extra.
I was gonna say, see, you got an extra week out.
So we're going to change it to the 14th?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
oh, thank you. Thanks, Margaret. You're right, that was,
And then just, since I've got the Greenway responsibilities, will that fit in under the open space chapter? Is that when you want to discuss any of that?
I haven't read ahead, so I don't know.
I'll just figure out where
I'm dying
we
to get
fit.
the update on that one.
I'm thinking it was, let me,
Actually, hold on. I better get a meeting with Mike.
they come under public services and facilities. No,
And I'll have the task draft.
That could be
done
over.
for the meeting.
it comes in under mobility.
It
Oh, is that
would
where
be
it is?
mobility, so
Right.
that's
Under
next time.
Next time,
All right,
yes.
I'll be ready.
perfect.
All right. Got my homework.
Anything else?
I would just ask, is there another copy of the master?
I have one more printed copy at home. I took it to the photocopy place to have it done. I can probably bring it here and run it off.
Well, I could too if I had a
Yeah.
copy.
You
Okay.
can download it. I went to Paradise.
That's
I
right.
put it on this zip drive and just gave it to them, and they printed
Oh, they
it.
printed it.
And they also bound it for me, and it cost $27. It didn't, but it's only black and white, so if I wanted to color, it was going to be like $89, you know.
I've got
I took this apart, took it to Paradise. I ran like 4 or 5 copies, and I've given
Yeah, I didn't get a pretty
almost.
cover.
You know, if you
I
want
didn't
to
get
do
it
it
without
without or take it apart, it's already loaded on here.
I take notes right in
All
here.
right, so what I'll do is I'll
Makes
swing
kind of
around with my
important
other
to me.
copy.
I'll set it on a
Notations
different
on it, but
one,
at least,
or do it that way.
Yeah, I can bring my computer.
Okay.
I don't know about-
Reluctant to give this away because it's got so much on there.
I just didn't want to do all of them here at town.
No, no, I
Reading
didn't
them
even
back.
under the
ask.
I
I
know,
assumed
it looked pretty
it was
bad.
just that alone.
Select board members using all the copy paper.
I'll bring my own paper.
Yeah, I do have it in the drive. Yeah, probably, I'll think about that, because that is my portfolio, so I'm not sure I'll have the master plan too.
Barbara, anything before we adjourn?
I just have one observation. I've been looking at this list of historic properties, and the survey goes on East Street up to Bertha Pease's house, but anything on the other side of town, my side of town, is not there. One of the significant properties is the Pomeroy Tavern. If you read Newtown on the Manhan, it talks about Pomeroy Tavern, which was a stagecoach stop.
That exists still, Barbara?
The parts that were part of the stagecoach building itself were taken down and incorporated into the house that I wish to restore. So there are parts of that that are very old.
But it wouldn't be in that.
Well, the house itself is, my grandfather bought in 1896, so I would think that that would make
Well,
it.
then that should be, it's on that, it should be updated. I'll check on that. Give me the address.
It's 107 County Road North.
Yeah. That's the one set back off the road?
Yeah.
Well, then that would be an oversight, because that should be, the house itself is older than 100 years.
Yeah, my grandfather, 1896.
Then that would be an oversight.
And then the other house that well, there are 2 others from my neck of the woods, and one would be, if you go down East Street and turn on the left, there's what is now the Barucki House. And I can't give you a number on that, but
It's the last house
My-
before the intersection, right?
No, it's after the intersection. As you come to the intersection, you look down the road. It's the
okay.
farm. Yeah.
and that is where my grandmother grew up as a child, so that was before my grandfather married her, the house in 1896. And the other house is on Cook Road, which was the Levesque house. And I remember going there as a child, and it was old then. It has been restored by Richard Zapper.
Is that the old farmhouse right before you technically get into Holyoke? On the left?
No, it's before that. It's the first, well, it's not the first, it's like now the 3rd house, but that's part of my neighborhood that I grew up in. And the yellow house is also old and should be included. That was the Preisner house. It was like they got to the top of the hill and said, that's enough.
No, I don't think so. I'm going to check Macris.
And I didn't see anything from the Hampton Ponds area.
Well, I'll put that as a question mark too.
So are we talking, speaking of old, 100 years, are we talking simply houses or are we talking structures?
Structures.
So my house on 83 High Street, I'm told by Ted Hendricks, the original house burned down, but the barn is clearly older. You can tell by looking at it. It's supposed to be a barn. The barn somehow survived the fire, which seems almost impossible to me,
Yeah.
but it clearly did. You just look at it and you can see.
I call these houses. What is the difference between a house and a structure? A structure
A
could be
barn, for
or-
example.
Could be
Yeah,
Any, or a commercial structure.
okay.
What is your address? Because I could.
83 High Street. The original house photo is at the Historical Society at the Clark Chapman House.
Is that Ethel Tiffany's? No.
No, it's that, who, I'm forgetting the name of the owner, but Frank
Frank Wayne
Wayne owned
owned
it. But it's the house, you know, Frank Wayne's lived in the brick house and it's the one right next to it. And you'd know the name, I could remember it.
All right. Mine's not that old.
Can I move to adjourn?
Yes, you can. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned at
Okay.
8:50.
8:50. Everybody have a nice holiday.
Indeed.
Yes.
Coming quickly.